Patrick Rice was 34. 3 months ago, he'd lost everything he'd spent 10 years building. His marriage, his reputation, and very nearly his sanity. All of it destroyed by a single lie. One carefully constructed, meticulously planned lie that his sister-in-law had told with tears streaming down her face at a family dinner while 23. People watched in horror. But here is what nobody knew that night. What Kayla didn't know. What Patrick's wife, Angelina, didn't know. What none of them could have possibly known. Patrick had proof. Evidence that would eventually tear apart Kayla's entire story and expose her for exactly what she was. He just hadn't discovered it yet. In 72 hours, everything would change. The truth would surface in a way that would leave everyone who'd turned their backs on him scrambling for explanations. Patrick sat in his apartment, his new apartment, a cramped one-bedroom, in a building that smelled of old carpet and broken dreams. When he finally pieced it all together, the timeline was right there in front of him. The bank statements, the hotel receipts, the text messages he'd recovered from their old phone plan. Suddenly, every confusing moment from the past 6 months began to make sense. They thought they'd destroyed him. They had no idea what was coming. Let him take you back to where it all started. November 12th, 2024, a Tuesday evening that began like any other and ended with his entire world imploding. Angelina and Patrick had been married for 8 years. They'd met in college. She was finishing her marketing degree, and he was 2 years into his computer engineering program at USC. They weren't rich by any means. Patrick worked as a senior network administrator at a mid-sized tech firm in Los Angeles, pulling in around $93,000 a year. Angelina managed social media for a boutique advertising agency, making $62,000. Combined, they were comfortable. They'd just bought a modest 3-bedroom house in Pasadena the previous year for $680,000, stretching their budget but making it work. They were planning to start a family soon. They were happy, or at least Patrick thought they were. Angelina's younger sister, Kayla, was 29 and perpetually in crisis mode. She moved through life like a tornado, leaving destruction in her wake and expecting everyone else to clean up the mess. She'd lived with Patrick and Angelina twice over the years. Once after a bad breakup, she claimed blindsided her, but that Patrick suspected she'd caused. And once after losing a job, she'd held for only 3 months because she didn't get along with management. Each time Patrick had bitten his tongue, helped pay for her expenses, and watched as she treated their home like a hotel, while contributing nothing to groceries or utilities. She's family, Angelina would say whenever Patrick expressed concern, her voice taking on that defensive edge she always got when it came to her sister. She just needs time to figure things out. You know how hard it's been for her. But Kayla never figured things out. She just moved from one disaster to the next, always finding someone else to blame, never taking responsibility for the chaos that seemed to follow her everywhere. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration. Angelina's parents, Robert and Catherine, were renewing their vows after 35 years of marriage. They'd rented out a private room at an upscale Italian restaurant in Beverly Hills, the kind of place with cloth napkins and servers who refilled your water glass before you even realized it was half empty. 23 family members were gathered around a long table decorated with white roses and gold candles. The warm glow of the candlelight reflected off the wine glasses, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Classical music played softly in the background, just loud enough to add ambiance without overwhelming conversation. Patrick had worn his best suit, the charcoal gray one Angelina had picked out for him last Christmas, along with the blue tie she said brought out his eyes. He'd been looking forward to the evening. Things had been tense at work lately. Budget cuts were looming, and he'd been putting in 70-hour weeks trying to prove his value to management. He needed this night, a few hours of good food, good wine, and family time. A chance to relax and enjoy himself. He should have known better. He should have noticed the warning signs. Kayla arrived late as usual. She swept into the room wearing a black dress that was just a shade too dramatic for the occasion. Her long dark hair cascading over her shoulders in waves that looked professionally styled. Her eyes were red-rimmed and she clutched a tissue in her hand like a prop in a play. Patrick noticed immediately. Kayla was always performing, always seeking attention, and tonight she'd clearly planned something big. There was something in the way she paused in the doorway, making sure everyone had noticed her entrance before moving further into the room. "Sorry I'm late," she announced to the table, her voice trembling just enough to be noticeable. "I've been dealing with something really difficult, something I wasn't sure I should even come here tonight and talk about." Angelina immediately stood up, concern flooding her face. She moved toward her sister, her napkin falling from her lap onto the floor. "Kayla, what's wrong? Are you okay? What happened?" Patrick watched as Kayla took a shaky breath, her eyes darting around the table, making sure everyone was paying attention. The conversations around them died down. Silverware clinked to a stop. Even the servers seemed to sense something was about to happen and retreated to the corners of the room. Patrick felt his stomach clench with an inexplicable sense of dread. What she said next changed everything. "I'm pregnant," Kayla whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. She pressed the tissue to her eyes, her shoulders shaking. "And the father." She paused, her eyes filling with fresh tears. She looked directly at Patrick, holding his gaze for just a moment too long. "The father is Patrick." The silence that followed was deafening. Patrick felt the world tilt sideways, his stomach dropping as if he'd just stepped off a cliff. Every face at that table turned toward him. His mother-in-law's expression shifted, from confusion to horror in the span of a heartbeat. His father-in-law's jaw clenched as his face turned red. Angelina's face went completely white, then flushed with anger so intense it seemed to radiate from her skin. "What?" The word came out of Patrick's mouth barely above a whisper. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. "Kayla, what are you talking about? That's insane. Don't act innocent." Kayla's voice rose, cracking with emotion that seemed almost too perfect, too practiced. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. That night in September, when Angelina was out of town for that conference in San Diego. You invited me over to the house. You said you were lonely, that you wanted company. You gave me wine. You kept refilling my glass. And then you—" Her voice broke into sobs that racked her entire body. "You took advantage of me. I was drunk and confused, and I didn't know what was happening until it was too late." Patrick stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor, the sound harsh and jarring in the shocked silence. "That's insane. That never happened. Kayla, why would you say something like this? Why would you lie?" "You're a liar!" Angelina's voice cut through the room like a blade. She was standing now, too. Her face flushed red, her hands trembling with rage. Her wine glass teetered on the edge of the table before crashing to the floor. Red wine spread across the white tablecloth like blood. "You're a goddamn liar, Patrick. How could you? How could you do this to me? With my sister? Angelina, please listen to me." Patrick reached toward her, but she recoiled as if he'd tried to strike her. "No." Angelina grabbed her purse from the back of her chair, her movements jerky and violent. "I'm done listening to you. I'm done with all of it. 8 years. 8 years I wasted on you, and this is what you do." Robert stood up, his face dark with rage, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Get out," Robert said to Patrick, his voice low and dangerous, barely controlled. "Get out right now before I do something I'll regret. Get out of this restaurant before I have you thrown out." Patrick looked around the table desperately, searching for one friendly face, one person who might question this insanity. His brother-in-law, Tom, was staring at him with disgust. Angelina's cousin, Sarah, who'd always been friendly to him at family gatherings, had turned away completely. His own Aunt Margaret, who'd come down from San Francisco specifically for this dinner, was shaking her head in disappointment. Not one person questioned Kayla's story. Not one person asked for his side. Not one person even hesitated before believing the worst of him. "I didn't do this," Patrick said, but his voice sounded weak, even to his own ears, drowned out by the accusations flying around the room. "Angelina, you have to believe me. I could never—" "Leave," Catherine said coldly, her voice like ice. She'd always been warm to Patrick before, treating him like a son, bragging about him to her friends, including him in family traditions. Now she looked at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "Leave before we call the police. Before we have you arrested for what you've done to this family." "I haven't done anything." Patrick's voice rose desperately. "This is crazy." I wasn't even, but nobody was listening. Kayla was being comforted by Angelina and their mother, both women wrapping protective arms around her. Other family members were standing now, their voices rising in anger, in condemnation. Someone was already on their phone. Patrick couldn't tell if they were actually calling the police or just threatening to. The walk to his car felt like a death march. Patrick's legs felt like lead, his vision tunneling until all he could see was the path in front of him. He could still hear voices from inside the restaurant. Angelina crying, Kayla being comforted, his name being spat out like poison. I can't believe him. After everything Angelina did for him, he always seemed so quiet, but you never really know people. The words followed him out into the cold November night. He sat in the driver's seat for almost 20 minutes, unable to move, unable to think, unable to process what had just happened. The cold leather against his back made him shiver, or maybe that was just shock. His hands trembled so badly he couldn't get the key into the ignition at first. His phone buzzed then again and again. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the silence of his car. Text messages flooded in like an avalanche. Angelina's best friend. I always knew there was something off about you. Angelina deserves so much better. His brother-in-law, stay away from this family. If I see you near my kids, we're going to have a problem. Even his own cousin, who'd always been close to him. Can't believe you'd do this to Angelina. You're disgusting. Patrick drove home in a daze, his mind numb, operating on autopilot. Their home. The house they'd bought together, painted together, filled with furniture they'd picked out on weekend trips to various stores. But when he got there, pulling into the driveway at 10:47 p.m., the locks had already been changed. There was a note taped to the door in Angelina's handwriting, her distinctive looping script that he'd always found beautiful. Your things will be dropped off at a storage unit. The address will be texted to you. Don't contact me. Don't come to my work. Don't try to see me. My lawyer will be in touch. He'd lost his house keys in the chaos of leaving the restaurant, Patrick realized. Not that it mattered now. The locks were different anyway. He tried his key just to confirm, watched it fail to turn, then stood there on his own doorstep, feeling more lost than he'd ever felt in his life. Before we go on with this great story, kindly like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are new stories every single day. Here's a soft challenge for you. There's a twist coming that changes everything. Drop your theory in the comments. Let's see if anyone can figure it out before it happens. Patrick spent that first night in a budget motel off the freeway. One of those places with flickering neon signs and rooms that rented by the hour. He lay on top of scratchy sheets that smelled like industrial bleach and old cigarette smoke, staring at the water-stained ceiling with its mysterious brown patterns. His mind raced through every interaction he'd ever had with Kayla, searching for some explanation, some hint of why she would do this. What had he done to make her hate him enough to destroy his entire life? Had he offended her somehow, rejected her in some way he hadn't even noticed? Then it hit him sometime around 3 a.m., when sleep still wouldn't come. September, the month Kayla claimed it happened. Angelina had gone to a marketing conference in San Diego. That part was true. She'd been gone for 3 days, September 14th through 17th. But Patrick hadn't been home alone. He'd been in Seattle for a major network security audit at one of their company's satellite offices, a critical project he'd been planning for months. He'd flown out early morning on the 14th and hadn't returned until late on the 17th. He grabbed his phone with shaking hands and pulled up his email, searching frantically for the confirmation numbers, praying he hadn't deleted them. There they were, September 14th through 17th. His flight to Seattle left at 6:45 a.m. on the 14th from LAX. He landed back in LA at 11:30 p.m. on the 17th. There was no possible way, physically, impossible, that he could have been at his house with Kayla during that time. Relief flooded through him so intensely he actually felt dizzy. He had proof, concrete, undeniable, time-stamped proof, flight manifests, hotel receipts from the Cascade Inn, where his company had booked him, meal receipts from Seattle restaurants, Photos on his phone with geotags, showing he was at the Cascade medical offices performing the audit. He called Angelina immediately, his fingers fumbling with the phone. It went straight to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He tried a third time. Voicemail. She turned off her phone or blocked his number already. He texted her, "Angelina, I have proof. I wasn't even in LA that week. I was in Seattle for work. I have plane tickets, hotel receipts, dozens of witnesses. Please just look at the evidence before you do something we can't undo. Please." His message showed as delivered but never read. The blue check marks that would indicate she'd seen it never appeared. He tried calling her parents. The phone rang twice before he heard the distinctive sound of being sent to voicemail immediately. They'd blocked him. He tried messaging Angelina on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, every social media platform they shared. Blocked on all of them. Every single one, like he was a virus they needed to quarantine. Nobody wanted to hear his side of the story. They'd already made up their minds. They'd already decided he was guilty, and nothing he said would change that, without someone actually looking at his evidence. The next morning, Patrick showed up at his office, with dark circles under his eyes and his clothes rumpled from sleeping in them. He hadn't even showered, hadn't thought to bring a change of clothes to the motel. His boss, Gerald Thompson, called him into his office within an hour of arrival. Patrick barely had time to sit down at his desk before Gerald's administrative assistant appeared. "He needs to see you now, Patrick. We need to talk," Gerald said, closing the door. The man looked uncomfortable, his usual friendly demeanor replaced with something distant and professional. He sat down behind his desk instead of in the casual seating area where they usually discussed projects, putting physical distance between them. "I received some disturbing information yesterday evening. Several calls. Actually," Patrick's heart sank. He felt his breakfast, the stale muffin he'd forced down at the motel, threatened to come back up. "Let me guess," Kayla called. "Your sister-in-law?" "Yes, along with several other members of your wife's family." Gerald adjusted his glasses, a nervous habit Patrick had noticed over the 4 years they'd worked together. "Look, I don't want to get involved in personal matters. And normally I wouldn't. But this is serious, Patrick. Really serious. We have a harassment policy here. We have standards of conduct. If what they're saying is true—" "It's not true," Patrick interrupted, his voice firm despite the exhaustion weighing him down. "Gerald, I wasn't even in California when she claims this happened. I was in Seattle for the Cascade medical audit. You assigned me to it yourself. You signed off on my travel authorization." Gerald's expression shifted slightly, confusion replacing some of the discomfort. "You're sure about the dates?" "Completely sure." "September 14th through 17th. I can show you my travel receipts, my hotel booking, my flight confirmations, everything. I have photos geotagged in Seattle. I have meal receipts. I can give you the names of everyone I worked with up there who can verify I was present the entire time. Gerald, there are probably 50 pieces of documentation proving I wasn't even in the same state when this supposedly happened." "Okay," Gerald said slowly, leaning back in his chair. "Okay, that's good. That's important. But Patrick, until this gets cleared up, until this situation resolves itself, I think it's best if you take some personal time. Paid leave, just a week or two until everything settles down and gets sorted out. You're benching me because someone lied about me." Patrick felt anger cutting through his exhaustion. "I'm protecting you," Gerald corrected, his tone almost apologetic. "And the company. If this becomes public, if this turns into some kind of scandal and you're here, working while allegations are flying around, it looks bad for everyone. It looks like we're not taking it seriously. Take the time, get your evidence together, clear your name properly legally, then come back. Your position will be waiting for you." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order dressed up as concern. Patrick walked out of the building 15 minutes later, carrying a box with his personal items, his coffee mug with the world's okayest network admin slogan that Angelina had given him, a photo of them from their honeymoon in Hawaii, where they both looked impossibly young and happy, some tech manuals he'd been referencing for a certification, The security guard who'd greeted him cheerfully every morning for 4 years wouldn't make eye contact as Patrick walked past. He checked into an extended-stay hotel that afternoon, using the emergency credit card he kept for work travel. The place was better than the motel, at least. Cleaner sheets, no obvious stains, a small kitchenette. 2 weeks. He just needed 2 weeks to prove his innocence and get his life back. Everything would be fine once people saw the evidence, once they realized the truth. But as he unpacked his laptop and started pulling together his evidence, organizing files and receipts, a new thought occurred to him, one that made his blood run cold. If Kayla was lying about him being the father, she was still pregnant, which meant there was a real father somewhere, someone she was protecting, someone she wanted to hide so badly that she was willing to destroy Patrick's entire life to do it. Who could inspire that level of protection? What kind of man would be worth sacrificing an innocent person to protect? That's when it clicked. Patrick opened his laptop and logged into their shared phone plan, something he and Angelina had set up years ago to save money, combining their lines with his parents and eventually Kayla's to get a family discount. Angelina had never removed him from the account. She probably hadn't even thought about it in the chaos of the past 24 hours. He pulled up Kayla's number. They'd added her to the family plan 2 years ago, when she was going through one of her financial crises, unable to afford her own phone bill. His hands moved quickly across the keyboard, pulling up call logs and text message records. The phone company kept metadata, even if the actual message content wasn't stored on their servers. Who she called, when she called, how long the conversations lasted, all of it was there, archived and time-stamped. And there, in the data spanning from late August through September, was a pattern. A phone number that Kayla called multiple times a day. Sometimes conversations lasted over an hour. Late-night calls. After 11 p.m., early morning calls before 7 a.m., the kind of pattern you'd see between lovers, not casual acquaintances. Patrick's heart was pounding as he ran. The number through a reverse lookup service. The results loaded slowly, his internet connection lagging for what felt like an eternity. The name that came back made him grab the edge of his desk to steady himself. The calls were to Derek Morrison, Angelina's boss, the married 52-year-old, creative director at Hartwell and Associates, the advertising agency where Angelina worked. The man who'd been to their house for dinner parties, who'd shaken Patrick's hand and complimented his cooking, who'd brought expensive wine and talked about his kids in college, who'd been married for 24 years to a pediatrician named Amanda and seemed to have the perfect family. Suddenly, pieces started falling into place, like a puzzle Patrick hadn't even known he was solving. Kayla had been doing freelance graphic design work for Angelina's agency over the summer. Angelina had mentioned it casually in July, said she'd helped Kayla get some contract work to help her out financially. Kayla and Derek would have interacted, would have worked together. Kayla, with her habit of seeking validation from powerful men, from authority figures. Derek, with his expensive suits and corner office and creative director title, and all the power that came with it. But why frame Patrick? Why not just keep it quiet? Have an abortion? Claim it was some random hookup? Why go through this elaborate, devastating performance that destroyed Patrick's reputation and marriage? Patrick leaned back in his desk chair, his mind racing through possibilities. Then it hit him like a freight train. So obvious he couldn't believe he hadn't seen it immediately. Money. Angelina made $62,000 a year. Decent money, solidly middle class, but nothing spectacular. But if she divorced Patrick for cause, for cheating with her own sister, getting her pregnant, she'd be entitled to a much more favorable settlement in California. She could claim emotional distress. She'd get the house, probably without having to buy out his equity. She'd probably get spousal support despite them having similar incomes. Because of the nature of the betrayal, because of how sympathetic her case would be to a judge. And Kayla, who'd never held a steady job, who'd always lived off other people's generosity, who was now pregnant with her sister's married boss's baby. She'd need money, lots of it, especially if Derek wasn't going to leave his wife and support her openly. Especially if Derek wanted to keep his marriage intact, his reputation untarnished. What better source of money than Patrick's assets split with her? Sister in a messy divorce. Angelina gets the house. Angelina probably gets a settlement. And then Angelina, out of sympathy and guilt for her traumatized sister, shares some of those assets with Kayla. Meanwhile, Derek stays safely hidden, his reputation intact, his marriage undisturbed, his career untouched. It was brilliant. Really diabolical, but brilliant. Frame Patrick for the pregnancy. Angelina divorces him in righteous anger, takes everything. Angelina splits the assets with Kayla out of sympathy and guilt, probably without even questioning it, because she's so focused on being angry at Patrick. Derek remains hidden, pays Kayla child support quietly through some arrangement, and everyone wins, except Patrick. The only problem with their perfect plan was that Patrick had proof he wasn't even in the state when Kayla claimed it happened. Proof he hadn't put together yet during that dinner because he'd been too shocked, too devastated to think clearly. Proof that would blow their entire scheme apart. But there was still one question gnawing at Patrick. Did Angelina know? Was she in on the conspiracy from the beginning? Or was she just as much a victim of Kayla's lie as he was? Patrick pulled up Angelina's call logs next, his hands shaking again, but this time not from shock or fear, from anger, from the cold burning determination to find out exactly how deep this betrayal went. What he found in those logs would answer that question, and the answer would determine everything that came next. The phone record showed something Patrick hadn't expected, something that made his stomach turn. Starting the day after the conference in San Diego, September 18th, the same day Angelina got back, there were a series of short calls between Angelina and Kayla, 3 or 4 calls per day, each lasting between 2 and 7 minutes. Exactly the kind of duration you'd expect for quick updates, check-ins, status reports, coordination calls. But there was more, much more. On November 10th, 2 days before the dinner, there was an hour-long call between Angelina and Kayla at 9:47 p.m. And then, just 15 minutes after that call ended, there was a 45-minute call between Kayla and Derek. And then at 11:20 p.m., another 30-minute call between Angelina and Kayla. They were coordinating, planning, making sure their stories aligned, making sure the timing would be right, making sure every detail was perfect. Angelina knew. She'd known all along. She wasn't a victim of Kayla's lie. She was a co-conspirator. Patrick closed his laptop slowly, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The woman he'd loved for over a decade, the woman he'd built a life with, the woman he'd trusted with every part of himself. She'd helped her sister frame him for something he didn't do. She'd looked him in the eyes at that dinner, performed that rage and betrayal so convincingly, and called him a liar, knowing full well that he was innocent. She'd known every single word out of Kayla's mouth was a lie, and she'd supported it anyway. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Kayla had done, because Kayla was exactly who Patrick had always thought she was. Selfish, manipulative, destructive. There had never been any illusions there. But Angelina had been wearing a mask this whole time. The loving wife, the supportive partner, the woman who'd promised to stand by him through everything. All of it had been an act. Or maybe it had been real once and had soured into something ugly. Something Patrick had been too blind to see. Patrick stood up and walked to the window of his hotel room. The sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple, the kind of sunset that normally would have seemed beautiful. Somewhere out there, Angelina was probably in their house, his house, the one he'd worked, 60-hour weeks to afford, celebrating her successful escape from their marriage. Kayla was probably being pampered and comforted by the whole family, playing the victim, soaking up the sympathy. Derek was probably at home with his wife Amanda, relieved that his secret was safe, that his affair had been successfully hidden. They all thought they'd won. They thought Patrick was too devastated, too isolated, too destroyed to fight back. They thought he'd just accept his fate, slink away, maybe fight the divorce half-heartedly, but ultimately give up. They had no idea what he was about to do, because Patrick wasn't just going to prove his innocence. He was going to expose every single one of them, their affair, their conspiracy, their attempt to steal everything he'd worked for. And he was going to do it in a way that left no doubt, no room for excuses, No way to spin the truth into something more palatable. He pulled out his phone and made a call. His best friend from college, Daniel Rodriguez, answered on the second ring. "Patrick, man, I heard what happened. Angelina's cousin Sarah posted something cryptic on Facebook, and when I called her to ask what was going on, she told me, 'I'm so sorry. This is insane. How are you holding up?' 'I need a favor,' Patrick said, his voice steady for the first time in days. 'I need the name of the best divorce attorney you know, and I need someone who specializes in fraud cases, because I'm about to burn their whole world down.' Daniel was quiet for a moment. 'You have evidence?' 'I have proof I wasn't even in California when Kayla claims this happened, and I have phone records showing Angelina, Kayla, and Angelina's boss were all coordinating before the accusation. I can prove this was planned, Daniel. I can prove it was a conspiracy to defraud me.' Holy shit. Daniel's voice was low, almost awed. Okay, yeah. I'm texting you a number right now. Patricia Winters. She's the attorney who handled my sister's divorce. 3 years ago when her ex tried to hide assets. Patricia destroyed him. Took apart every lie, every hidden account, everything. She's expensive as hell, but she's worth every penny. Tell her I sent you. Thanks, Daniel. Patrick, whatever you're planning, make them pay. The attorney's office was located in a sleek high-rise in downtown Los Angeles, one of those glass and steel buildings that seem to reflect the sky itself. Patrick sat in the waiting room the next morning, his leg bouncing nervously, watching well-dressed professionals stride past with purpose, carrying expensive briefcases. The lobby had marble floors and modern art on the walls, the kind of abstract pieces that probably cost more than Patrick's car. He'd used almost all of his emergency savings to afford this consultation, but Daniel had been insistent. If you're going to war, you need the best. Don't cheap out on this. Patricia Winters was not what Patrick expected. She was in her mid-50s, with silver-grey hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun and sharp blue, eyes that seemed to catalogue everything about him in the first 3 seconds. She wore a navy suit that probably cost more than Patrick's entire wardrobe, and when she shook his hand, her grip was firm and confident. Everything about her screamed competence and control. "Mr. Rice," she said, gesturing to the leather chair across from her massive mahogany desk. Behind her, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of downtown LA that probably cost more per square foot than most people's homes. "Daniel spoke very highly of you," she said. "He said you have evidence of fraud. Why don't you tell me everything, starting from the beginning?" Patrick had prepared for this moment. He'd spent the last 3 days organizing everything. Printouts of phone records with calls highlighted in yellow, his travel receipts from Seattle, screenshots of text message metadata, even security. Camera footage from his hotel that showed him in the lobby during the exact time. Kayla claimed they'd been together at his house in Pasadena. He'd created a timeline document, cross-referencing everything. He'd printed photos from his phone showing him at the Cascade, medical offices with geotags and timestamps visible. He spread it all out on Patricia's desk, organizing it methodically. "My sister-in-law is claiming I got her pregnant. She made the accusation publicly at a family dinner 3 days ago, and my wife immediately filed for divorce the next morning. But I wasn't even in California when the alleged conception occurred. I was in Seattle for work, and I have proof." Patricia picked up the documents one by one, her expression neutral but focused. The afternoon sun streaming through her office, windows caught the edge of her reading glasses as she examined each piece of evidence. She didn't rush, taking her time with each receipt, each phone log, each photograph. After what felt like an eternity, she set down the last page and looked at him directly. "This is airtight," she said, her voice carrying a note of professional satisfaction. "You can prove beyond any doubt that you weren't there. The flight manifests, the hotel records, the geotags, any one of these would be strong evidence. Together they're unimpeachable, which means the question becomes, why would your sister-in-law deliberately frame you, and why would your wife support that lie?" "Because she's protecting someone else," Patrick said. He pulled out another set of papers, the phone records showing Kayla's communication with Derek Morrison, the real father. "I have phone records showing she was in constant contact with my wife's boss, Derek Morrison, during the time she would have gotten pregnant. Hundreds of calls, some lasting over an hour. Calls at all hours, early morning, late night. The pattern is clear. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly, genuine interest crossing her features. Derek Morrison, the creative director at Hartwell and Associates. You know him? I know of him. Big name in the advertising world? Married to a pediatrician, 3 kids in college. Very concerned about his reputation from what I understand. He's the kind of man who would pay significantly to keep an affair quiet. She leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her face. So your theory is that your sister-in-law had an affair with a married man, got pregnant and decided to frame you to avoid exposing him. Planning calls right before the public accusation. Hour-long conversations, then calls between Kayla and Derek, then more calls between Angelina and Kayla. I think they're working together, all 3 of them, to take my assets in the divorce while protecting Derek's reputation and marriage. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, studying the phone records, cross-referencing dates and times, her legal mind clearly working through the implications. Mr. Rice, what you're describing is conspiracy to commit fraud. If you can prove it, and I mean really prove it, not just circumstantial, evidence, then you're not just looking at winning your divorce. You're looking at potential criminal charges against everyone involved. False police reports, fraud, possibly extortion, depending on how they've structured things. Good, Patrick said, and he was surprised by the coldness in his own voice. The way it didn't even sound like him anymore. They tried to destroy my life. They turned everyone against me. They deserve whatever's coming to them. Patricia studied him carefully, her sharp eyes reading something in his expression. I need to know something before I take this case, Mr. Rice. Are you prepared for how ugly this is going to get? Because once we start pulling threads, once we start exposing affairs and conspiracies, there's no putting that genie back in the bottle. Your wife's career could be destroyed if her boss is fired or forced to resign. She might lose her job too. Your sister-in-law could face legal consequences that follow her for years. Derek Morrison's marriage will almost certainly implode, and his professional reputation will be ruined. Are you prepared to be the person who sets all of that in motion? Patrick thought about Angelina's face at that dinner, twisted with rage and disgust that seemed so real. He thought about sleeping in that motel while she lived in the house. He'd worked 60-hour weeks to afford. He thought about his colleagues avoiding eye contact with him, his family members blocking his number, the way his mother-in-law, Catherine, had looked at him like he was garbage. He thought about being escorted out of his own office like a criminal. Yes, he said simply, I'm prepared. They made their choices. They chose to lie, to conspire, to destroy an innocent person.